So before you start analyzing another author's argument, in order to kind of dissect it and see its different parts, which is the purpose of this learning target, you need to take some notes to be able to understand what those different parts are that you are looking for. So, if you have not already gotten a paper copy of this argument analysis notes, which comes from Mrs. Harrison, and if you haven't already gotten some highlighters from her, which would be blue, orange, yellow, and pink, then you need to pause this video and go grab those now. After you have all of those materials, I need you to know that as you are taking notes during this lecture, you need to be listening to what I'm saying and not just mindlessly copying down what I say. That is not going to help you digest and understand the information. So as this warning says here, if you're used to playing music in the background as you're working or whatever, sometimes that's okay. This is a time when it's not. So you need to turn off any other videos or music that you have going on. You need to put your cell phone away. You cannot be reading anything else. You need to be focused in 100% on this information, and here's why. You will use the information that you learn here not only on practice exercises, but on your assessment. So it's very important that you are paying attention so that you actually understand the concepts that I'm teaching here. This is somewhat complicated. Okay, so as it says up here, this section of your notes should be highlighted in blue. You can do that. You can just highlight this text over here blue. You can wait until you're done writing all your notes and then highlight that whole section, however you want to do it. But with purpose, I do want you to highlight this section blue. So the first thing that you're analyzing, that you're going to be finding and then analyzing, is the author's main argument or thesis statement. So as you read these other texts authored by other people, they are all argumentative essay type texts. You need to be able to hone in on what is the main argument that they're making here. Everything else stems from that, okay? So here are some notes about that. Often this statement explains what should or should not be the case. Or sometimes the argument is explaining what is most effective or important, okay? But it's making some sort of argumentative stance, right? And you know this from when you wrote your own thesis statements for your junior project first semester. Here are a few examples of the claim sections of some of the thesis statements that I got from people. One person argued that police officers should wear body cameras. Okay, so this is a should statement. Another person argued that manufacturers should primarily use robotic workers. Okay, another person argued that laser welding should be more widely used than it currently is. Okay, these are just a few examples that came from your writing. So these were should and should not statements, okay? But just off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me. I remember one student wrote about electric cars, had the potential to have the most impact, positive impact on humanity, okay? So arguing that something was the most of something, or is the most effective or important of something. These are examples of argumentative statements. So when you are searching for these in the text that you're reading, that's what you are looking for. Many authors give background information and or they discuss the opposing viewpoint before they state their own stance. And if you think back to when you wrote your thesis statements, you wrote them as a concession, then claim, then reasons style thesis statement, which means you first mentioned the concession of your opponent's viewpoint before you came in and delivered your stance on the issue. So for example, the thesis claim that I read a moment ago about manufacturers using robotic workers, this is the full statement. Although it could take jobs away from people, manufacturers should primarily use robotic workers. So sometimes it happens right there within the thesis statement where you are going to give your opponent's viewpoint first. And even before that thesis statement comes, the author of that essay will need to give some background information to their reader. So the point here is that when you're looking for this in somebody else's argument, it's not going to be the first thing that you see. No good argumentative writer comes right out of the gate with their thesis claim. Okay, they're going to give background information, and they're probably going to preemptively, which means before it could their opponent could argue against them, they're going to preemptively discuss what could be an alternate point of view before they deliver their own claim. Sometimes this thesis argument is going to share a sentence with another idea, meaning their opponent's position, which is exactly what I just mentioned. I'm going to give you another example of this. Although police body cameras are too expensive, police officers should wear body cameras because, and then they go on to give some reasons. So they started by giving their opponent's position, which is that body cameras are expensive, but they still maintained their idea that officers should wear them. Here's another example. Although laser welding requires a lot of training, it should be more widely used. Okay, so they start by conceding to the other side. So when you're looking for the actual author's main argument, it's most likely just going to be a small part of one sentence. And yet, that is the entire crux of the essay. So let's move on to next look at sub-arguments and reasons. So this section of your notes you should highlight with yellow. And the question is, what reasons or sub-arguments does the author give to support the main argument? So here are some notes to help you locate that and the arguments that you are going to read and study. Sometimes these are stated within the thesis statement. And this is exactly how you wrote your thesis statement for your junior project, right? Because you started with a concession, your opponent's a point of view, you gave your point of view, your claim, and then you gave reasons. And then the body of your essay is going to unpack those reasons. So let's look back at this laser welding example. Although laser welding requires a lot of training, it should be more widely used than other types of welding. And here are the reasons. The laser welding is more accurate, it requires less maintenance, and is capable of welding small and awkward to reach areas, or hard to reach areas. So, right within the thesis statement, this person drops 3 different reasons why laser welding is superior, why it should be used more often. But then after that, it is sprinkled throughout the essay, okay? So as I said, yes, it's stated in the thesis statement, but it's only stated in there because the thesis is meant to preview the rest of the essay and the structure of that essay. So I already know that this person who's writing about laser welding is going to spend at least one paragraph talking about how laser welding is more accurate. They're going to spend at least one paragraph discussing how it requires less maintenance, and then at least another paragraph discussing how it is capable of welding small and hard to reach areas. Now these reasons and sub-arguments should be supported with evidence, okay? It doesn't mean a lot to just state that that's true, okay, unless you yourself are a known expert in laser welding and you are a high school student. So that's not the case. So obviously this thesis that I keep referencing about laser welding, for each point that they raise, they're going to need to show that that is supported by experts in the field. And that's exactly what the authors of these essays that you are going to study and analyze are going to do, or they should do. The next section of your notes, are orange, is all about evidence. Okay? So here's where you're going to be locating the evidence, which are facts or statistics from outside sources that the author uses to support their argument. So, one thing to note, this could be a quote or a paraphrase. Now, for the purposes of your research essay, because you're practicing quoting evidence, you'll be using quotes primarily. Okay, you could use paraphrases. We'll talk about that on a case-by-case basis. But I really want you to practice quoting evidence. But when you're reading other people's argumentative essays, you will notice that oftentimes they will paraphrase evidence, and that's okay. But here's what's very important. Every piece of evidence from an outside source, it should state where that information is coming from. And we'll study an example of this in the next video. But you cannot just drop a piece of evidence without stating where it comes from, otherwise that would be plagiarism, which is stealing, okay? If you don't claim where that came from, then the reader might assume that it came out of your head or your own research study or something like that, which you have not been conducting research studies. So be careful of that when you're writing your own. And this can help you find evidence in other people's writing, because you should see some sort of statement where they're stating where the evidence that they're about to drop came from. Also, this evidence should directly prove the reason or sub-argument that it's meant to support. So as you're analyzing whether or not this person has a good argument, part of how you're going to analyze that is how good is their evidence, and how well is that evidence supporting directly the statement that it's meant to support. And we'll look at examples of that. This next section of your notes should be highlighted pink. And here's the question that you're striving to answer. What points does the author discuss from the opponent's perspective? So a good argumentative essay writer will always draw in their opponent's perspective in an effort to combat it, of course, and to explain why their opponent is either mistaken or that their perspective is weaker than the claim that the arguer is making. Sometimes this is stated within the thesis statement, and I've referenced this many times, but if you are writing a concession, claim, reason style thesis statement, which is what you will be writing for your junior research essay, then of course it will be stated right there what your opponent's perspective is. But it can't just be stated there. It should be sprinkled throughout the essay as well, just like the author's own arguments, sub-arguments, and reasons. Just like with the author's own claims, the opponent's perspective, as it's discussed, should be supported with evidence, okay? Otherwise, this is called sort of a straw man fallacy. If you are claiming that somebody else believes something and knocking it down without showing that other people actually are saying that, then you can fall into a logical fallacy. So you should show with evidence, as you are writing your own argument, that what the opponent actually believes. Okay? Now, you don't just want to state what the opponent believes and prove it with evidence. That wouldn't be very good for you. You also must respond to the opponent's perspective, meaning to disprove it in some way. And again, we will look at examples of this in action. So, if you need to rewatch any of this or go back, pause, rewind in order to get all of this information down in your notes and to understand it, please do. The next thing you'll be doing is an activity where I will guide you through how to color code somebody else's argument to match these different parts so that you can siphon out for yourself and see what the main argument is, what the supporting arguments are, what the evidence for those are, and what the opponent's perspective is.